Okay, just want to thank everybody for showing up. This is something I try to do annually, try to get coaches together. And in the past, we've done it in more of a presentation mode. So an expert comes up here and talks to you. There may be some questions during, very rarely, and there may be a few questions at the end. But what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get people to show up who are also experts and also engage the discussion started by what we are calling a facilitator, but it is an expert who's leading the discussion. We have a lot of open-ended time to talk about it. If you want to get into arguments, that's great. If you want to fight, you can go outside. But we want this discussion to be pretty intense in terms of, let's make sure we've talked about things that we need to talk about. And the reason that I'm doing this is I think a lot of the educational stuff that's out there now, especially with the online information out there, is not open-ended. We don't get to ask why. We don't, and if it's on a forum, it ends up in some sort of ridiculous argument. And we're not talking about facts, we're not talking about experience. So if you look around the room, we got some young people here, but we also have people with gray hair. And that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing, because most of the people that I draw my information on have that experience. Not that I don't talk to the group that I work with, my staff and interns. They have some things to offer that I can learn about as well, mostly related to social media. But I think we have to draw on these resources that we have, because once they're gone, they're gone. And that's one of the mentors that I had. He's gone now. I can't talk to him. I have all these questions that you come up with different challenges every day, and now I can't ask him. And that's one of the saddest things about that for me, is I can't ask him other questions that now I have, because I'm a little smarter now. Maybe the questions are more advanced, and he's the person who can answer them. So that's what I'm trying to draw on. I'm trying to draw on experience, and I'm trying to create discussion, and I want people to ask questions. If Dr. Chu says something and you're not sure, put up your hand and say, hey, Dr. Chu, what do you mean by that? I don't quite understand. I've never encountered that. So that's what we're going to try to do. And hopefully it comes off. I don't know. This is a bit of an experiment. But that's really what I'm aiming for, is open discussion. We also have some athletes here that I work with who have some different issues with regards to rehab or injury. And we're going to bring them up, and we're going to get into more of an interactive discussion as well as, okay, what's the problem? What should the outcome be? What are some prescriptive things we can do with them? So that's what I'm trying to do. Hopefully it works. Do you think it's going to work?
Yeah.
So my first speaker is pretty much the guru, mentor, I hate to use that word guru, but the all-knowing person that I want to start us off is Dr. Donald Chu. And if you followed his career, and I think I was reading his books back in the 80s, and I had one of his med balls, and I saw him speak at some NSCA conferences. But he's somebody that I draw on as like, that's a foundational resource person that I need to talk to. And he's known for plyometrics, but his career has spanned so many different areas in rehab, performance, and if you look at his resume, you could spend the whole day going through his resume and going, wow, look at that, look who he's talked to, look who he's worked with. So that's the kind of person that I'd want to draw experience on, not somebody who's just writing a blog and making up things. And I think that's what I want to shove and direct people to, is this person has done it. So I came up with the title here, so if you don't like the title, it's on me. But Dr. Chu's going to work some magic here, and he's going to start us off. So everybody, let's welcome Dr. Donald Chu.
It's really good to be here. I love being up here in Canada, even though it's I've never seen a sunny day yet. But I understand that you do have such things. I intend to make this real casual, and when I first saw this title of this talk, I thought, that's like an SAT question. It's one of those open-ended things that there are no answers for. So I'm going to show you some things and talk to you about some things that I think fall under this category. And you may not totally agree, but just kind of play the game with me, and we'll see how this winds up. All right, where do you start? We're all about adaptation. I mean, that's something that we're taught right from the beginning. It's the adjustment of an organism to changes in an external or internal conditions or circumstance. And that's that's what we do. We work with athletes and we attempt to change them and get them to adapt to our way of training, and with hopefully the outcome being better performance. And as we look at this, adaptations for performance can range from those that take place in the early phase of training to those that take place with long-term training to those that take place over many years. And this is the kind of thing that I think we often lose sight of, is that when we start working with somebody, we're looking for that immediate change. The problem with today's athlete, as I see it, because I am an old codger, is that everybody's looking for instant gratification. Everybody wants that magic pill, that magic exercise that makes them soar and makes them think that they're really accomplishing a lot right now. But they don't think in terms of a career. Now, I've made a living out of working with professional athletes who have gotten to the point in their career where they realize it's coming to an end. And their only objective, their only goal is to extend their athletic life. How can I be good for a longer period of time? So they're coming with a different sort of perspective. They're coming with a different sort of circumstance in many instances. And so now my goal is to think in terms of long-term progression. How can I help them achieve this training adaptation that occurs over a long period of time? The principles that we all adhere to, I don't care who you are, when you work with people, you work with the idea that exercise stimulus is subject to the principles of specificity. I mean, if you've got a rower, you're not going to train them to be an all-out 1-rep max bench presser, I would hope. And you know, you understand the concept that there are things that fall under the category of specificity that mean, you know, we are training you for a specific goal. And we also apply the principles of intensity, frequency, recovery, and variation. And variation's important. One of the things that, you know, you listen to the people talk about the NBA playoffs, and they talk about coaches that as to how they relate to their players. And, you know, coaches don't last very long. Why? Because the players they've heard everything that the coach has to say. And as soon as that occurs, then they lose interest in listening to the coach. And a lot of times teams just fall by the wayside when that occurs. I think in specifics about our young group down in the Bay Area, the Golden State Warriors. Right now they've got a bunch of kids that fall in the 20 to 25 year category. And Mark Jackson's a reverend on the side. So he's always preaching good faith and, you know, positive energy and just do this, just do that. Well, you know what, 5 years from now, I want to see Mark Jackson deliver that same speech, because I don't think it'll fly with those players. And what he's going to have to evolve into is he's going to have to evolve into being a Greg Popovich who just beat his ass in the playoffs, in that Popovich talks to San Antonio players about, I want you to specifically do this, to Tim Duncan, to Parker. I want you to specifically flash to the goal and then kick the ball out, etc., to so-and-so. And they have, you know, his whole perspective is he knows exactly what he wants to do, and in order to achieve the goal of winning the game, he's got the ultimate plan. Whereas Mark Jackson is still talking about be high energy, be upbeat, and be Stephen Curry and walk around like with your head hanging down and your physical posture looking like you've just been defeated, because you have. And it's just amazing, you know, to see how those things transition. So when we look at the long term for these athletes, we see that things have to change. Training elite athletes, as most of you know, requires careful program design, and monitoring of them becomes critical. Okay, so they want to know. I work with tennis players all the time, professional tennis players who stop by in the Bay Area, and they'll work with me for a couple of days, and it's inevitable. You ask them, what do you hope to achieve with this particular time? Well, I want to improve my first step. God, it's too late. it's gone. Your first step is what it is. And you know, you've got to realize that you need to work on other things, and that other goals are going to become more important to you than your first step. Now, we've done some interesting things with tennis players, and there's some fellows down in Southern California, trying to think of their names right now. I can't think of their names, but they've done a lot of research on balance and stance. And they feel they actually have algorithms, mathematical algorithms, that will allow you to calculate where a baseball pitcher or batter should have their feet before they start their particular movement, so that they are at the best point of balance. That's kind of interesting stuff. And we've done it with tennis players, and I'm working with a guy right now by the name of Rajiv Ram, who is ranked 40 in the world in doubles and 85 in singles. And we worked with Rajiv, and the only reason he's in Northern California, because good tennis players generally don't come to Northern California, they all go to LA or Florida. But he's up there because he has a girlfriend, G. Okay, so he comes in, and we work with him on this stance thing. And so he just got back off a tour. He won a $100,000 challenger down in Brazil, etc. He's making a living playing tennis, and everything's good. And I asked him, I said, what'd you think of our last session where we measured out your stance and gave you those points for you to stand? He says, you know, it really helped on serve receive. He says, the rest of it, I don't think it helped in any way, shape, or form, because when you're playing tennis, you're on the move, and you can't position your feet for every stroke. So, but he said, on serve receive, I want to be in the best position of balance so that I can move in any direction. Well, that makes sense to me. And he felt that was a big improvement in his particular game this time around. So we'll see as he goes forward, and we'll come back and we'll check him. And you know, typically when you work with an athlete, you say, get your feet shoulder width apart, get in the athletic stance. You don't say put your feet 27.5 inches apart. I know you don't. And you don't tell them, I want you to feel the weight bearing on your midfoot. Okay? Anybody say that to an athlete in the last couple of days? Nah, come on. So the idea is there are other ways to look at these guys, and even though we're concerned about how much they clean and how much they lift and how explosive they can be in a particular jump, there may be some other factors that we actually have to expand our base of knowledge in order to be effective as trainers of these people. All right, fine-tuning is the key to success in achieving a sport-specific goal. All right, I had the privilege of working with a young woman by the name of Colleen Reenstraw at one point, who was the world indoor record holder in women's high jump. Her goal was to make the Olympic team, and you know what almost killed her was the fact that she was from Arizona, and the competition was being held in Indianapolis, and she wouldn't drink the water. Say that again? I don't want to drink the water here in Indianapolis. Why? Because it's not the same as Arizona, and I don't trust it. Are we a little paranoid? Maybe, but that's what you have to live with. Well, despite the water and the other things, she made the Olympic team, and she had a pretty good career. I don't know how many times she was a national champion, but she was able to win the national championship, the indoor national championship in January, 3 months after she gave birth to her daughter. It's pretty good comeback. But a heck of an athlete, and she had no idea how strong she could be. She was just a great gifted talent, and when I started her squatting, we were at 285 outside the rack, free squat, free back squat, and she's pretty pleased with herself. And she's 5'9½", weighed 140 pounds, and looked very much like a mesomorphic athlete. So, you know, tremendous talent. And then she found out she could do that kind of strength training. She had never done that kind before. And she was actually at the tail end of her career, and she was able to achieve the goal she wanted to achieve, which was to make the Olympic team and represent the U.S. One of the things that you all know, I'm sure, at the top of the athletic heap, there are no part-time athletes. You get people that if they want to be great in their sport, that's their job. They have to be dedicated to that. They have to come and they have to make the commitment. I've had a young man in the last year who was a former sprinter at UC Berkeley who wanted to try out for the men's bobsled team. So he came for 3 consecutive workouts. The next workout he missed, called me, said he had something else to do because he was an insurance guy on the side. And so he came to the next workout, then he missed the next 2 workouts. And then I called him up and said, you know what, this is not working out, stay home. You have no chance to make the bobsled team. He said, what? I said, you have no chance to make the bobsled team. There's no commitment on your part. I mean, if you can't be there, if that's not your priority, then it can't be my priority either. So we just parted ways amicably, but just reality-wise as well. Okay? So that's a testament to the commitment and degree of change sought by the athlete. If you want to be a part-time athlete, just accept a part-time accomplishment because you're not going to get there. All right, here's my favorite picture. I was driving everybody in the country crazy with this thing. What's with this young man? What is that sticking out of his arm anatomically? I'll take questions. This is interactive. And you all have had anatomy. What is that sticking out of his arm? That's a pretty good guess. Yeah, that's his ulnar nerve. And that's been confirmed by, I sent it to Rob right away because I knew Rob would have the sources. And Rob doesn't know anything, but he knows resources. And so he went to the orthopedic guys, and they all kicked back and answered and said, well, ulnar nerve, we think, okay, with a question mark and everything. But that's a subluxing ulnar nerve. I've never seen it captured in a film like this. And this is an unbelievable spot. So guess what this is a 14-year-old kid, 6'1", probably 160 pounds, and he wears size 14 shoes. So he's got some growth potential, but he also has this nerve sticking out of his arm when he throws. And so what do you think his main complaint is right now? Sore elbow. Yeah. He's got elbow pain that he's dealing with at 14, and it's kind of interesting because his baseball coach is also his PE teacher. And so the other day, his baseball coach, who is also his PE teacher, decided that he knows the kid has a sore elbow, so he decides the kid should participate full go in the PE class, which was an hour of badminton. And then he couldn't figure out why the kid couldn't pitch on Friday. So it's just no reasoning with these people sometimes, okay? So in terms of rehabilitation, employing these same principles in determining the ability of an athlete to return to play results in a series of field tests, similar to performance testing. Now, there was an all-call that came out from the NSCA, and I don't know what's going to happen, but they asked for a 500-word article on return to play. So I typed it up real quick and sent in my return to play thing. And when I do return to play thing as a physical therapist, I think of field testing. I've always thought of field testing. Vermeil and I wrote an article back in the beginning of the NSCA in the early 80s called The Rationale of Field Testing. Clever title, right? And we determined at that point, and we were relying on East European literature, that the purposes of field testing were to identify talent and to mark progression. Okay, simple enough. Well, when we talk about rehabilitation and we talk about return to play, what are we doing? We're doing the exact same thing. Okay? Field testing allows you to do these things, and it's the first is, of course, an identification of talent. If you're looking for somebody who's going to be an explosive athlete and they have a jump and reach of 8 inches, are they going to be explosive? No. But I worked with a world-class athlete, played professional basketball for a number of years, who had exactly that, an 8-inch jump and reach. Measured, identified, recorded, calculated, an 8-inch jump and reach. And I told him that he needed to develop some leg strength so that he could develop more leg power. And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he says, "Why do I need that when I can do this?" And he stood there and stuffed the basketball without leaving the ground. His name was Manute Bull. 7'4" 3/4 inches tall, arms, 8-foot wingspan. And sure, Manute could see no reason why he should jump any higher. And it was hard to argue with that. It really was. Okay? So when you do field testing, one of the things that you want to do is the key is the correlation of the test to the sport. What is it that you're looking for? And how successful are we at achieving the first two outcomes, that identifying talent and marking progress? Now, field testing is characterized by inexpensive stuff. You know that. It just takes a tape measure, a stopwatch, some tape lines, etc., whatever. Going to sophisticated timing devices is really a technological advance. But we identified talent and have done it for years. And Al Vermeil and I had the chance to do the instructional league for the San Francisco Giants one year. We went down to Scottsdale and we tested a young pitcher that we were actually running the 40. And the young pitcher ran the 40 in 6.5 seconds. We had female shot putters at Colorado Springs ran faster than that, for God's sake. And we went to the general manager and told him that, this kid, not really a talent. And one of the pitching coaches just swore by this kid. He had put his reputation on the line that this kid was going to be a great professional pitcher. And we went and watched him throw, and he never used his legs once. He just threw with his arm. And I made the prediction that he'd never finish the season, he'd blow his arm up, and he did. And I was right, and the San Francisco Giants finished 14 games out of first place that year. So, at any rate. All right, athleticism incorporates many physical characteristics, some of which are more amenable to training than others. And these are called parameters of athletic performance. And this is what we're all shooting for. We're all shooting to maximize somebody's athletic performance capability. We're trying to identify the talent. This is a young man that was drafted in the 6th round by the Oakland Raiders last year by the name of Bergstrom. He's an offensive tackle out of Utah. And the difference between last year and this year is just amazing. The transition that he's made physically in terms of size, strength, and agility, he just looks like a professional football player this year, whereas last year he kind of looked like a soft, kind of big, sloppy tackle. So it'll be interesting. Now, looking at progress, I think one of the things that you always have to consider is the energy system demands. Okay, what is it that you're trying to train? Which energy system? And all of us are in this room, I guarantee you, if you ask us, we're all anaerobically based. We're interested in developing power athletes. Anybody in here a distance coach? I hope not, because if you are, you're really lost. So, at any rate, my son married a distance runner. He married the girl that was her father is a distance runner at Davis. We have real tough times in family get-togethers. I have nothing in common with this guy, but at any rate. Okay, so we're interested in developing maximum muscular strength, low speed strength, but we're also interested in developing anaerobic power, high speed strength. And if we don't, then we're missing the boat. If we're just looking to build size and mass, then we are somehow just losing it. We're not getting everything out of our athletes that we can get. Local muscular endurance. I say that because I'll talk more about this when we get back to the rehabilitation standpoint. But this is one of the huge things that happen when people have surgery. They don't realize how much muscular endurance they lose and at what a deficit they have to come back from. So at some point along the way, you have to test them for their muscular endurance, not just anaerobic strength, as high-speed strength or maximum strength. You have to test them for that endurance component as well. Agility, change of direction kinds of things, speed. We all know we're always working to make people faster. Flexibility can be an issue sometimes, depending on the sport. Body composition is important, anthropometry. Body measurements are becoming more and more important. And you'll find football coaches in the NFL now that are looking and measuring guys' arm length, because offensive linemen, they want them to be able to extend their arms and keep people off of them. So if a guy has Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, he's going to have a tough time keeping those defensive ends from grabbing a hold of him. So even those things can be sort of a limiting factor sometimes. Okay, the needs analysis. We've all done needs analysis at some point or another, and the mechanics of sport become important to us. It's amazing to me how much I have learned about different sports through the years. I'm a guy who went to 3 Olympiads with the U.S. National Synchronized Swim Team. Okay, I still have tough times admitting that that's a sport. Okay, but a free trip to the Olympics, free tickets to weightlifting, you know, I'll go. I'm a mercenary. That's all there is to it. But the mechanics of sport are gonna play a role and play a part in whatever we work with. And so it's something that you have to make yourself familiar with. And I've got some ideas for you as I go further into this talk. Now, the assessment of the athlete is extremely important. And these next 2 things, training history and training background, to me, are 2 different things. One, when did people start lifting weights? When did they start training? Who did they start with? How did they start with? Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, I would rather work with an athlete who had one coach who taught them everything wrong for 6 years than to have an athlete who had 6 different coaches coach an athlete for 1 year. The reason for that is, and you have to accept this, because when I interview people and I'm talking to them about this, this is very important to me, because the first thing that goes through my mind is, are they going to listen to me? And I'll guarantee you, those people with a varied background are going to look at you, and going through their head is, should I believe him or not? Now, so-and-so told me that I should do it this way, but now he's telling me I should do it this way. Okay, you got a problem, because somebody's got to make a total commitment to the situation. The athlete's got to be willing to be a little flexible and commit to your line of thinking. Otherwise, they should never be connected with you. All right? And we see it all the time at the professional level. I help Al Miller out with the Oakland Raiders once in a while, and I'll go down there and you'll see guys and they'll say, well, when I was at Alabama, we did this way. And Miller says, well, hell, I was from Alabama, so, you know, this is the way I'm doing it, so I want you to do it this way. And he'll talk about the rationale, and you'll look at the guy, and you can just see right behind those eyes. I mean, it's like a ticker board going across their eyes. Do not believe, do not accept, do not register. You know, it's just amazing. And then they get out there and they do something goofy, and if they don't believe in what you're trying to get across to them, they get hurt. They do something that's halfway in between, and the end result of that is injury. And now, hell to pay for everybody. At the professional level, the one thing a strength coach can't do, and those of you who work at this level, you know this already, you live in fear that the guy's going to do something and start complaining about his back. Okay? There's your biggest fear, because now the management's going to come down to you and go, you know what? Sam, we've decided that you'd be better off in Cleveland, so we're releasing you. You know, and it's wrong, but that's the way those things work. Okay, in the needs analysis, you're always going to have some physical testing and evaluation that's part of it. And as the outcome of that physical testing and evaluation should be goal setting. You should be able to decide and to establish a set of goals for that particular individual. You've got a 24-year-old athlete and they're power cleaning 190. 190 kilos, and that's sort of their max. How much better do you need to make them? I don't know. Depends on their sport, depends on what they're doing. And, you know, out of your testing and evaluation, you should come up with goals. Maybe your goal is not to make them stronger in a power clean. Maybe your goal is to improve their side-to-side agility movements or something like this. But you'll come up with those goals, and that's how you usually set them. Then, of course, what you all do every day, exercise selection. Now, I hate the word core. I've come to despise the word core because of how it's been bastardized. Core, to me, was core. It was a fundamental kind of thing. Well, now it's sort of an assistance exercise. Doing something that is not related to the major movement, but maybe an assistive exercise. Okay? Or, to me, structural exercises are where I like to think in terms of things like the power clean, squatting, etc. We're doing a power exercise. We're going to do a structural exercise that's going to improve the entire structure of the body. Okay, so here's the kicker, genetics. The upper limit of an individual's genetic potential dictates the absolute magnitude of training potential. End of story. End of story. Now, it's interesting because the higher the level of the athletes that you're working with, the less differentiation there is between their genetic potential. And so you're really talking about nuances and fine tuning. When you're working with a bunch of high school kids, you really don't have any idea what their genetic potential is because the spectrum of development is so big, so large. I mean, they could, in 2 years, become just unbelievably better than what they start at. And that's what we call adaptational potential. And I'll tell you how I do it. So who'd your dad play for? Okay, you got adaptational potential. Okay? I'll never forget working with a guy named Purvis Short who played basketball for the Golden State Warriors. And his kid comes into the clinic one day, and he's about 8, 9 years old, runs across the floor, plus he's almost 6 feet tall at 8 or 9, but he runs across the floor, he jumps up on a box, he jumps off the box, lands on a trampoline, jumps off the trampoline, lands in front of the medicine balls, grabs a medicine ball, throws it down to the other end of about 30 feet away, the other end of the mat, and then he just kind of proceeds to run back and forth like a little kid. I looked at that kid and I told Purvis, I want to recruit him. Because I'll tell you what, he showed me his adaptational potential right there. And he had it going on. He had the stuff that it was going to take. Now, every once in a while, you'll find that person who just strays into your office, strays into your weight room, and they're just a mongrel. They're just a stray dog. And you know nothing about them, and they show you a tremendous amount. And those kids are great. But I'll guarantee you, if I had my druthers, I believe in selective, whatever that's called. You know, those Germans had somewhat of the right idea. And you got to go out and you got to get those kids. So potential. Genetics shapes us in many ways, including our potential to excel in sports. Training, diet, and other factors play a large role in developing our potential, but our genes may also limit performance. You may have the genetic potential for being a championship athlete, but if you live a lifestyle of overeating and no exercise, you are likely to achieve that potential, which is what the kids of a lot of professional athletes do. Okay? They all become so privileged, and mom and dad can't say no, that pretty soon they negate their athletic potential. So sometimes it's better to get that junkyard dog who's just hungry and wants to bite everybody in the ankle because they have a different kind of drive and a different kind of motivation. Okay? On the other hand, someone with limited genetic potential can find ways to compensate and become a solid performer, AKA all the white kids in the NBA. Okay? So, there's a place for everyone. So what have we learned? We've learned a little bit about sport-specific exercise and how certain movements will help an athlete. This is a young lady I worked with years ago, Lindsay Davenport. And Lindsay Davenport won the 1996 Olympic title in women's tennis. And up until that point in her life, all she heard from Martina Navratilova and Chris Everett and all the people who did the announcing was, oh, she has such great potential, but she's so heavy. And she's so tall, but she's so overweight. And et cetera, et cetera. And for some reason, after she won the Olympic title, her whole mindset changed. Now this is really interesting because this does happen a lot. So there's an event that occurs that changes the direction of an athlete's life. After she won that title, she kind of made the realization that, you know, I can be pretty good. And maybe if I lost some weight and trained a little harder, I could be a lot better. So she was ranked #1 for the next 3 years after she won the Olympic title. And it was interesting that people would say, oh, she made this tremendous transition. And my whole thing was because I had known her when she was much younger. Here she was, 19 years old. She just bought a condo in Newport Beach. She bought a new car, a Mercedes convertible, and she was making on the tour about $600,000 a year. What's my motivation? Why do I need to be better at 19? There was none. Until something happened to her, some event that just enlightened her. So she sort of self-actualized, if you will, at that particular Olympic event. And it was great for her. And she's had a great career. Now she's got 2 kids, retired, and doing very, very well. Okay, we know something about muscle balance. And when we train people, that we have to have some idea of how different sides of the body work with each other. Reciprocal firing patterns are extremely important in the prevention of athletic injuries. We know that when in overhead sports and throwing sports, that if we don't have deceleration muscles in the back of the shoulder and around the scapula, we're going to encounter shoulder problems. These things are really important to us, and so we know about those. We've learned a little bit about technique of sports. Periodization is something that still is a little bit nebulous. Now, if I'm working with a one-sport individual athlete going for in a specific season, such as a track and field season or a weightlifter with a specific goal, I think I could periodize a program for them. Okay? You can't possibly periodize a program for a professional tennis player. It's just not happening because they are just too erratic in their schedule. They go to a tournament, they lose early, they hop on a plane, fly to the next tournament. They play late into the tournament or they win the tournament, and then they hop on a plane and fly to the next tournament. Now, how do you periodize that? You can't, and they do it all year round. They maybe have 2 months out of the year where they have some downtime. And you talk to them about training, most of them don't even want to train. All right, availability. What kind of equipment, what kind of training time? I listened to some of the conversations last night. Some guys are talking about working out of an 1,100 square foot gym, the 1,100 square foot weight room. Okay? How's that working out for you? Not your ideal situation, but if that's what you got, that's what you got. I've heard criticisms of people who don't use anything but machines to train with. Okay? Why? Because when they got to the facility, that's all that was there was machines. You've got to use what you got, and then you've got to create and innovate. But it's always something that sort of taxes our abilities to be adaptable, taxes our abilities to invent things and to come up with ways of accomplishing what we really want to do. Now, these are the things that I really believe are sort of the horizontal things. These are things that I think are coming at us that are going to be very, very important to us in the future as strength coaches. Prediction equations. I mean, I look at the NSCA book that Beckley and Earl edited, and there's a page in there that'll predict a 1 rep max for you. And it's based on mathematical algorithms on what people have done at multiple reps. I find that very useful. And I don't think it's tremendously accurate, but I think it's useful. So it gives me some way of finding a number that I can write a program based on a 1 rep max if I have an athlete that I don't believe should be subjected to a 1 rep max. Okay? We've got ways of predicting stride frequency now. I'm going to show you some other things that I think are important. Ground response time. Okay, the one thing, I've said this from day one, this is my story and I'm sticking to it. Great athletes don't spend a long time on the ground. Okay, so I want to produce people that get off the ground quickly. Get off, get off, get off. Okay, so the idea is, in order to verify that, in order to predict that, I need some sort of a device to do so. Years ago, oh God, I can't even begin to think, probably 30 years ago, Al Vermeil and I developed a whole series of switch mats and switch devices. But you have to know, Al, the device could not stop with just measuring contact time on the ground. It had to continue to calculate how high up in the air you were. It had to make milkshakes. It had to fry burgers. Al just can't stop with a device that does one thing. It's just amazing. So at any rate, we had that discussion many, many times. Okay, some of the subjective things that are important. As we look at young athletes, developing athletes, rehabilitating athletes, strength, endurance, and control are tremendously important. Balance. Anytime you have a surgical intervention on a joint, you destroy the proprioceptors, some of the proprioceptors in and around that joint. So you better have a way of redeveloping that balance acuity and coming up with a plan for stressing that so that people can learn to balance again. And let me tell you, one of the worst tests that you can do, but a lot of people do it, is a single leg balance test. Stand there and balance for 30 seconds, okay? All right, now stand there and balance on the other leg for 30 seconds. What has that told you? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. Okay? Because there's no correlation between that and what you do on the injured leg versus the non-injured leg. And Neurocom, which is one of the largest producers of balance testing mechanisms, will be the first to tell you that there's no correlation on that, but everybody likes a single leg balance test. No, you're much better looking at things like stride length and ground contact time to decide whether these people have the capability of returning to play and whether they've actually got the control to allow themselves to go back in. One of the other things that we're trying to get a handle on is really the coordination of muscle firing patterns. We still have this problem between the quads and the hamstrings, and people straining hamstrings, and people with the contention that there's a misfiring between the quads and the hams. One of the big things about ACL injuries in women, that women fire the quads much more than they do the hamstrings. And so therefore they're quad dominant. So when they land, they snap the legs up straight, and the transition of the tibias is forward, and boom, ACL's gone. So obviously that's a possibility. So if that's a possibility, what's the best way to improve that coordination of muscle firing? Well, in my mind, it's teach them how to jump. But that's it. Now, you write this down because you should check this out. Those of you who have an iPhone or an iPad will want to look at Dartfish Express. Victor Borgenzal, who's the guy who runs Dartfish, sent this to me the other day, and he gifted me this app. It's a $5 app, $4.99. And what does it do? It's designed to do two things well. Give you convenient feedback to the athlete and allows the ability to upload to Dartfish video sharing websites. So you can send it around to different people so they can look at it right away. Okay? Dartfish Express, it's a great little app, and there are a lot of other apps that are out there, and I'm sure a lot of you have them. But for $4.99, come on. You've got your athlete doing a squat, and you take a picture of them, and then you can run this thing back frame by frame. We had a kid with the Raiders who came in, what's his name? His last name's Budico or Bildico or something like this, but huge kid, 6'5", 287, could not squat. He'd never squatted. 4 years of college football, he'd never squatted. I don't even want to tell you where he's from because I don't even know. I think he should have been from Mars, to not have any experience at all. But he would squat and then he would start falling backwards. And he would have fallen on his keister every time. So we worked with him. I mean, Miller had him up against the wall doing physio ball squats and dumbbell squats and everything else. And I just kept yelling at him, stick your ass out. And finally he did, and towards the end of the year, I had another app then. I have one, Kinesio Capture. Some of you may have that. And I had that one, and I filmed him, and I showed him, and it was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. A little feedback went a long way with this kid. This year, he's going to get a lot of playing time, and he looked great. And he was doing complexes with, I think, 120 kilos the other day, and not too bad. Not too bad at all. Okay, so convenient feedback to the athlete, ability to upload Dartfish video sharing. Yep.
I think UberSense is free right now.
Another?
It's another app.
Another app, yeah.
There's a few that are free. So.
Okay. So I know how precious the Canadian dollar is, so you guys spend that money. But at any rate, I'm not marketing Dartfish Express, believe me. But it's just a representation. There's about a half a dozen of them that are out there now. And I think all of you should have one on your iPhone or on your iPad, just because you will not believe how convenient it is to go back and show somebody what they did and talk about it. Okay, data collectors. I mean, Nike right now has that fuel band thing. It tracks running, walking, basketball, dancing, etc. Set goals, track progress, motivate, brag in Facebook, whatever you want to do. You can do any of those things, but they're data collectors. Okay, and the data collection is part of your history. And if you're an athlete training seriously, you want to know what the history is. I think most of you would agree that a young college athlete is going to make the largest degree of improvement between their freshman and sophomore years. When they come back their sophomore year, they look like different human beings. And you go, wow, what happened to you? And now they've gone from being kids to being men or women. And they look like it. And so you want to be able to track that historical stuff. If they ended up squatting 185 pounds at the end of the year, you don't want to come back and start them at 185 pounds. You want that to be their warm-up set. And then after that, you're going on from there. So you need to be able to keep that data control stuff, that data stuff, because it helps the athletes really, it's a tremendous motivator for them, and it really does allow them to see and visualize that they are getting better. Okay, now, I thought of this, and I patted myself on the back. I thought, well, that's really a clever slide. Okay, to go forward, look backward. All right? Look to Soviet Sports Review. How many of you in here have never read an article out of Soviet Sports Review? Raise your hand. Don't be bashful. Okay? Yeah, Soviet Sports Review. Where's that come from? Soviet Union. There you go. But now, how many of you, if I gave you the original article, would read it? Hell no, because nobody here reads Russian. Now, this is Canada. There's probably one of you in there somewhere. But at any rate, we have a translated version. A guy named Michael Yesus, who is a language professor at Long Beach State. who became a self-appointed strength and conditioning coach by virtue of his ability to translate the Soviet sports review. So whatever. Okay. But look back to the East European coaches in writing. I mean, they were kicking our ass in 1968, and by our I mean the USA. They were kicking our ass in the Olympics in 1968 for a reason. Why? They had better training techniques. And we talked, you know, we had the universal machines. Remember the universal machines? Everybody had 18 stations, and the idea was to go through each of those stations and do a set of 10 or 12 repetitions, and that was our form of strength training. Chuck Coker and all that group. And so we thought we were the cat's meow. That was the best thing in technology. And if you went to Leipzig or some of the other training centers in Germany and stuff, these guys are throwing up cans full of cement. Okay, but they were doing functional type exercises. They were doing cleans. They were doing snatches. They decided a long time ago. The Russians, the one thing that the Russians said, we will be stronger than you are. And that was their whole philosophy. And boy, they whipped us up pretty good for quite a while. Okay? And until their system came apart at the seams, you know, which had nothing to do with their coaching deal, they did a pretty good job. You know, then the Bulgarians adapted, the Germans adapted to all this stuff, and they led the world in strength building. And they gave us a lot of material to work with. Medvedev, Bosco, who was from Italy, Comey, Vittori, Javoric's Complexes. How many of you have ever read his book? Javoric's Complexes are great stuff. Al Miller's a huge Javoric fan, and that's the mainstay of the Oakland Raiders program right now are these complex routines. And they're really good exercises, good combinations of different exercises. Vereshchansky, it was my idol. He's the guy that trained Valerie Bermel, Sanyev, Igor Taravanesian, guys who weren't beaten in their athletic lifetime. I mean, unbelievable athletes. Of course, the key to Taravanesian's success was that he had a bottle of brandy at the end of the runway, and he'd take a little sip of that before he came down the runway. That wasn't banned in those days. I don't know if it is these days either. But Zatskareski, Sif, I have to put Sif in here. Sif was not really a coach. He was a great collator of information and a bit cynical. Bampa's up here in Canada. I went over to see Tutor Bampa one time at York University. He's got an office about the size of one of these broom closets. And here's the guy that, you know, had written all about periodization, has had all these books and everything, and I expected him to be in this corner office overlooking the campus or something with windows all around. Damn broom closet. Tutor, they just start treating you right here. But at any rate, some of the pioneers for the USA who wrote a lot of stuff in the beginning, Mike Stone, John Garhammer, and of course our dear friend Al Vermeil. And Vermeil's greatest comment ever was, "Who have you coached?" Okay? So the proof is in the pudding. My favorite comment is, you know what? We put our athletes on the field, you put your athletes on the field, whoever wins is the best coach. That's all. It's that simple. And then you just go from there. But, you know, it's hard to judge success in this business. But I think the success comes in how you are represented by your athletes. Okay? Or we can look ahead to things like CrossFit. Nobody threw up? I see his head shaking though, but that's good. Pilates. Huh? How about gyrotonics? How many of you in here have done a gyrotonics workout? Nobody? Oh, you guys are missing it. I'm telling you. Yoga. I have athletes that come to me all the time and go, now if I take this yoga class, this is going to do this for me, right? And I just shake my head and laugh and just go, no. Okay, kickboxing classes. Oh, those are good too. Everybody wants to be a kickboxer. MMA classes. We have a lot of MMA places. You guys have MMA places? You got to have them up here in Canada. This is the latest thing, you know. We've got a few of those around in our area there. Things like the TRX, or maybe you're a power plate advocate. So all of these are things that have come up in just in the last few years. But people look at these things as the new trend. And of course, what do these people do? They market. They market like crazy. They show you a Hollywood starlet or star and say, this is what Charlie Sheen does in between sexual adventures, okay? And you go, oh God, I gotta do gyrotonics because I wanna be Charlie Sheen. I just heard a really good joke about him the other day and I can't remember it now, so I won't go ahead. Okay, preparation. This is where it's at. Prioritize. One of the things that I think we all realize, again, when we start off and we're working with athletes, we want to improve their work capacity. I mean, more than anything else. I looked at the Golden State Warriors against San Antonio, and I went to the last game just before I came up here. And I'll tell you what, they just ran out of gas. Didn't have the work capacity or the experience to last 2 rounds of the playoffs. Stephen Curry ended the game walking around like this, I swear to God. He was a sports psychologist's dream. If you videoed him, you showed the perfect example of what defeat looks like in the 3rd quarter. Okay? So those kids didn't have the work capacity that was necessary to sustain them. I'd rather have guys walking off the court pissed off that they lost, but walking off with their head up and their posture looking good and determined to go next year into a better year. You know, strength is something that we're always looking to prepare people with. Power. Metabolic systems of training are really important. I put this young man's picture up here because this is a kid I've known from 11 years, from the age of, well, he says 10 years, I said 11 years of age. Andre Ward, world champion, super middleweight class, never defeated. Olympic champion, never beaten. He hasn't been beaten since he was 11 years old in a Golden Glove match that was rigged for a kid from Colorado. That he fought again and killed him, just annihilated him. But Andre Ward is the one thing that people would ask me and say, what do you think his greatest attribute is? It's not his punching power, because he's been walking around with a torn rotator cuff that he just had repaired for probably 10 years. He's a predominantly left-handed puncher. It's his body speed. It's his body speed. Now think about that. Not foot speed, not hand speed, body speed. People can't hit him because he's never where you think he's going to be. And he moves so quickly with his body. And I can't say that, you know, he got that from training with me or anything else, but that's his knack. That's his skill. And that he is very much aware of. And when he fought the light heavyweight Chad Dawson, Dawson was so slow, he could never find Ward. And Ward just was launching himself off both feet to hit him with a punch. And he eventually knocked him out. So it's just amazing. When we think about these kinds of things, we don't think in terms of those kinds of skills. Body speed. Okay? So, did I go the right way with this? I didn't, did I? Okay. So I wanted to talk about the field testing stuff. I'd shown that picture before. But I want to talk a little bit about return to play. This is the article that I did. I think there's some meaning in this, and you can make of it what you want. But you all work with getting athletes back into play. And you're always looking for things to assess their ability to return to play. The worst thing you can do is to return a kid to the football field, soccer field, or whatever, and have them get re-injured. Because now everybody's disgusted with you. Okay? So these are 5 tests that are simple to administer, require a minimum of equipment, so they fit in that classification of field tests, yet will provide useful information on whether an athlete's ready to turn to running, agility work, and eventually play. The first is butt kickers, okay? I'm going to go through each of these individually, but we'll just line them out here. Butt kickers, single leg squat, Bulgarian squat jump, single leg endurance press, and 60-second box test, which is part of the test that I came up with years ago, the 90-second box test, which I will swear by as the test if you want to measure anaerobic ability. You do the 90-second box test in 90 seconds, and I'll be impressed with you. Okay? I was telling people at dinner last night, I saw Bodie Miller. I use a 12-inch box. I saw Bodie Miller, the great U.S. skier, do 100 counts. In other words, landed on top of the box 100 times in 90 seconds. And the only difference between him and my test is he did it on an 18-inch box. Yeah, which is pretty good. Which is pretty dadgum good. And that test is not a Don Chu original. I'm good at stealing other people's material. That came from the Scandinavian national ski team, and that's what they use to help select their athletes. Good enough for them, good enough for me. So that was a real good one. Okay, butt kickers. Now, this is one that a lot of people don't really realize this one, but I call it dynamic range of motion. You want to know whether somebody's got a knee that's rehabilitated? You can set them on a table and a physical therapist can measure them and say, oh yeah, they have 128 degrees in the right leg, 128 degrees in the left leg. They're good to go. Bullshit. Stand them up and ask them to run and kick themselves in the butt with the heel. 9 times out of 10, the involved extremity will not come up as high. So they don't have the same heel recovery on the involved side. Well, guess what happens if you do that? If you're running with one side where you have a low heel recovery, film that person at 5,000 frames per second, and you're going to see 2 things. One, they have a shorter stride on the involved leg, and 2, they don't have the same frequency, the same speed at bringing the leg through. So a long lever moves slower than a short lever. There's your physics lesson for today. And so what happens is they can't transition that leg through because they've got a longer lever. So in essence, if you look at them at 5,000 frames per second, you're going to see they're running with a limp. They look like they're galloping. And that's not efficient and that's not effective. Okay, so one of the things that I always challenge the athletes that are coming back off of knee surgery with is be able to do the butt kicker and bring both heels up at the same time. Had a young female sprinter from Castro Valley High School who injured her quad, had a quad strain. Okay, asked her to do the butt kicker. Her injured leg was way less than her non-injured leg as far as recovering that heel. She was never going to be able to be an effective runner while she was working at that kind of faulty mechanic level. So when we got her to the point where she could do the butt kicker effectively, guess what? Her quad was completely relaxed. She was able to go out and start training and running, and she was able to be effective. And I think she's going to the state meet in the state of California, which is a pretty good challenge. Okay, single leg squats. This is a great test. And I propose that you should do this with your athletes as a warm-up exercise. Okay? Have them stand, heel right up against the edge of the box. I should use this pointer here. Okay, right up at the edge of the box, put the other toe right on the box and slide down until you reach a full position. Now notice his foot's not on the ground. Okay, he's fully flexed. This kid, by the way, 6'3", 260, I think. And then he's going to stand up. And he had ACL surgery on the right knee. So I made him do all these tests with his right leg for this particular test. So he's got the dynamic range of motion. He can do 4 sets of 6 single leg squats as part of his warm-up routine. And then the Bulgarian squat jumps, simple. You put the foot on one box, you go down, you do a single leg squat, and then you jump up in the air. The problem is that we screwed up the pictures and I didn't get the subsequent picture, but you try to jump up in the air and bring this heel up against the back of the thigh, or as close to it as you can, and then land on it, okay? Now, I'm standing over here looking at him head on. So what I don't want to see is I don't want to see any valgus. When he lands on that leg, I don't want him caving to the inside. I want him to land and be stable. I don't want to see all this shaking and vibrating stuff, okay? Because I guarantee you, if he can't take this kind of impact, he's not going to be able to take on the field impact. He's a defensive end, trying to get a scholarship to a Division II school, talking about going as a walk-on to University of Miami, which I think is stupid, but you know, he thinks big. But the kid wants to go on and do these things, and he's not going to be able to do it if he can't land on that leg and be stable when he lands on it. Okay? And then the endurance leg press. This is an MVP shuttle. And all it is a single leg press, and what I do is, most of the time I only have to do 12 reps. And I compare right to left. So it's a test within a, you know, it's a test within the kid himself. He's not trying to meet some outside goal or outside mark. And what I'm looking for again is subjectively, when he's going down, does he have any tremor? If I see tremor, he's done. He's not getting off this thing. And we're going to work this, and I will go 5 sets of 12. How many of you in here are familiar with total motion release? Anybody ever see total motion release? You know who those people are? Down in North Carolina. They do a lot of stuff working with the good side. And I like what they do. So here's how I would work this kid. I would have him do 2 sets of 20 with the good leg. 2 sets of 20 with the good leg. Because what they preach and believe in is contralateral transfer. Okay, work the good leg, we've heard this before. Work the good leg, the left leg gets better. Okay, not to the same percentage, but there's a little bit of transfer, some 6 to 8% transfer of information. So, okay, they get that. Now they do their regular 5 sets of 12 or 5 sets of 10, whatever, on their involved leg. Okay, but you start off 2 sets of 20 on the non-involved leg. And it works pretty good. I like it. And again, what I'm looking for is to eliminate any of that tremor. So this kid, he has maximized with a single leg now. If any of you are familiar with the MVP shuttle, he has done all the chords. Can't add any more chords to it. That's pretty good leg press. Okay. All right. So the art of performance testing, and it really is, or art of performance training. This is what I've learned, and I believe it's an art form. It's an art form as much as it is a science. Okay? We need and we have to be able to understand and integrate objective data into our workout sessions. We need to do that. We also still need to be able to digest and integrate subjective data. Okay? How many of you have ever watched somebody start their lifts and you just went, stop, let's go home? You ever do that? Right in the middle of the workout. And the kid's like, what? What? Why? Because you're shitty today. Okay? Just give it up, you're terrible, and you're not going to get any better. Go home, I'll see you tomorrow. I've done that many times. And I'll tell you what did I make that decision based on? It wasn't an objective output, it was a subjective output. And I look at the kid and I know by their transition through the different movements, etc., they're not stable, they're not objective, they're not focusing, not objective, but they're not focusing, they're not concentrating, and they just do things in a halfway manner, and I see disaster waiting to happen. So when you get into those situations, you still, I think, are best off taking the initiative and saying, you know what, come back later. You know, I look at training, and what I feel like I've learned about the art of performance training, they're like putting in a pair of orthotics. You know what orthotics are, right? Arch supports. If you undercorrect, you'll always be able to tolerate orthotics. If you overcorrect, you'll know it in the first minute, and you will take the orthotics out because your feet can't stand them. So it's a little bit like that. Can you appreciate the mechanics of the sport? Can you appreciate the metabolic demands of the sport? Synchronized swimmers, I can't, it's like, okay, Don, figure us out a program for these little synchronized swimmers. Oh my God, why don't you just tie weights to them and drown them all? But I look at them, and you know what? As I assessed them, I realized that they had the same metabolic demands as an 800-meter runner. Their routine's 3 to 5 minutes, and they're working hard. They're working really hard, holding their breath, doing a lot of stuff under the water, and cranking away, and they have metabolic demands. So you have to consider that and take it into their training, and put it into their training. And then that goes to the next thing, can you design that training program? Can you make it effective for them? Okay, I'm a huge believer, always been a believer, hard work, smart work. My workouts generally last 45 minutes, and I'm subject to being criticized or argued with on this all the time, I don't care. 45 minutes and we're out of there. Okay? Why? Because I think there's a limited number of things that you can accomplish. I really believe that most college kids have the attention span of a gnat. And so the idea is, let's be effective, let's be judicious, and let's get it done, and let's go home. And so when I work with these kids, I really try and get them to give me all they've got for 45 minutes. And there is research. It's just like a lecture. If you talk and you lecture for longer than 45 minutes, you've lost 45% of your audience. Because that 45% is daydreaming about cutting their lawn or painting their house or doing something else, picking up their kids or whatever. And the other 55% are having sexual fantasies. So, you've only got a limited amount of time to do things. And if you can do these things, you've arrived. And now you're ready to learn about performance training, I think. Things Mother never told me. What's my motivation? I'm telling you, that is the $20,000 question. You ask a kid, what's your motivation for being here? Just ask them that question sometime. Look at the answers you get. I'm sure it'll be interesting, okay? How about when the athlete comes in and tells you, my girl or boyfriend wants to go on an extended vacation, an extended trip, and wants me to go with them? What do you say to that one? Well, you're giving up all that training, and you're giving up the chance of a lifetime, and in their mind, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, yeah, but I'm going to get laid. It's hard to fight that. It really is hard to fight. Then you have the athletes that are too good to be bothered by training. They come in, they've got the attitude, they've got the posture, they've had some success in their sport, they're too good to be trained. Don't need this stuff. Rob tells a story about a professional football player who, when he worked out, he'd do everything that he was supposed to be working out, but if you were just observing this guy, he's going, oh shit, that guy wants me to lift this, he wants me to do this, he wants me to do so many sets of that, I can't do that, that's crazy, what's this guy thinking about? And then when you confronted the kid and said, hey, what are you doing? He said, don't bother me, I just talk to myself when I'm lifting. And he'd do everything that he was supposed to do. So, again, you just don't know sometimes about the external thing. Again, we talked about the different coaches. I have heard so many different stories, I don't know who to listen to. Okay, you get 5 different people teaching to clean, you got 5 different ways of doing it. And that's just the nature of things. Everybody thinks they've got their little wrinkle. And it's probably it should be more unified than it is, but I think, again, people don't get together, decide on what is the best way to do it. If you've got staffs, believe me, if you have staffs, you need to get together with your staffs and train your staffs to do what you want them to do. Because otherwise, I'll guarantee you walk into your weight room and there'll be somebody doing something you have never seen or thought of or even conceived of being possible. And then you'll go, what are you doing? Well, JoJo over here told me to do it this way. Oh my God, okay? Then you have those athletes who have the bad hair day. And they just admit to that. They just have the bad hair day, and then that's when you say, okay, maybe we'll just come back tomorrow. And then, of course, my dog ate my homework. That's always a good one, too. Now, everyone stands on someone else's shoulders. Believe me. I appreciate the fact that Derek gave me all those kudos and everything, but I think really, from my perspective, I know I listened to those who came before me. And those of you who are younger really need to go back and look at what history has said about how to train elite athletes. Find out, who came before us and what they knew and what they thought. Observe others and their strong points. Communication is a tremendous thing. We can have all of the book smarts in the world, but we've got to be able to communicate with the athletes. You got to be able to get that nuance across. You want them to pull from a certain position. You want them to have their wrists in a certain position when they initiate that pull. You want them to move in a certain way. You need to communicate that to the athletes. Never underestimate the lengths that one will go to achieve success. Okay? I think you get kids that will do anything you ask them to do. And when you get them, those are the ones that you want to devote time with, and you want to give them a little extra attention, because it's amazing the return on investment that you get from these people. Don't turn down a volunteer, all right? I always like people who come through and they want to volunteer, and I listen to some of the strength coaches at the NFL level, and they get so many applications, so many resumes, they just throw them in the trash can as soon as they get there. They don't even listen. I don't know if I'd do that. I'd read the resume first. And if you think there's a chance that you got a volunteer, I love the story of a kid that was a triple jumper for me. And he was so bad, I couldn't even get him into a meet. Okay, he came out to triple jump for me. He went 37.6. Really? Well, you gave it a good effort. Okay, you want to hang out? Go ahead, hang out. Okay, I'll try to get you to meet, but I'm going to be honest, I don't know. At that time in space, I had 5 triple jumpers, and they all ranged from, the worst one was 47.8 up to 54.10. Okay, so pretty good group, kids. 4 of them were over 50 feet. And so and here's this kid that went 37.6. So I said, okay, I'll let you hang around and you can do the workouts and we'll see how it goes. Okay, he did the workouts. I got him into 2 meets that year. 2 meets. I pulled some people out, made them run other events, and I let him in. And so he hung around. Then after he graduated, he said, I want to come down to your clinic. I want to volunteer. I'm like, Jesus, this guy's like dog food. You can't get him off your shoe. So, okay, come on down. So he came down, and he's hanging out. And I had another guy hanging out at the time, Remy Korchimny. And so this guy would talk to Remy all the time and soak up everything he could soak up from Remy. Fortunately, not everything, but at any rate, he soaked up a lot. And one day he came to me and he says, I want to go on my own. He says, I don't want to work for you anymore, and I want to try something else. I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll try and get you a job. So I called up Meg Ritchie down in Arizona, and I said, all right, I got a kid here that has learned quite a bit. He's a good worker. In about 4 years, he'll go into a state of depression, and he'll come in and he'll whine and moan, and then he'll leave you. I said, you interested? And she said, yeah, I'll take him. Okay, Meg. She's kind of that way too. But at any rate, he goes down there and he works for her for 4 years. gets into a state of depression, and he leaves with a guy named Mark Verstegen, and they go to Bollettieri's Tennis Academy. So they're working there for a few years, and then I guess they both got depressed, and then they came back to Arizona and started something called API, Athletic Performance Institute. So now, after a few more years, he leaves API because reportedly he got an offer he couldn't refuse, and Darrell Ito is now the head strength coach for the Houston Rockets. 37-6 to the Houston Rockets. Never turned down a volunteer. Okay? So there's going to be a jewel in that pile somewhere. And you just got to let your intuition kind of go with it and just see how badly they really want it, because they'll come to the fore. Darrell's an excellent strength coach. Excellent strength coach. And I'm just sort of degrading his state of depression. He did it a couple times, so then now it's a trend. Okay. Be grateful for the knowledge you have received. I love talking to people like yourselves, because I think that's the thing, and I think that's what Derek perceived would come out of this whole thing, is that we open up lines of communication, and you're going to hear things. How many of you had heard of the Dartfish Express app? Couple of you. But otherwise, there you go. I gave you got your money's worth today. Just off of that.
It's still $5.
$4.99. Okay, get it before they start taxing the internet. Okay, and then of course the end thing is leave something for the rest of us, because I know you're all going to go out and conquer the world, and some of us are going to want something. So let's talk a little bit about the future, because I think it's pretty intriguing. ESPN, the magazine, that bastion of evidence-based practice, published an interesting feature the other day describing several innovations with expected arrival times as short as a year to as far out as 15 years. And this is going to affect all of us. Okay, some of which are CT scanning, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is what got Junior Seau and some other people and really is causing a problem with the NFL these days. For the first time, researchers at UCLA have scanned a live brain. Before, they've always had to have the brain after the person's deceased and then done the autopsy on it to see if they had signs of chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But now they can do it in a live situation. Okay, moving forward, iRobot. The University of Washington has created a lens that displays a single pixel of information. Soon, it will allow an athlete to view the field from all angles, etc., with a special pair of contacts. So the quarterback, you say, okay, this is the field, and I want you to see the different, where the positions of the players are and everything, and go through your progressions. You're going to be able to see all that through these contacts. And you're going to know where every athlete's at. Amazing. Okay? Emotive is a company that is developing helmets and headbands which will allow live EE brainwave neurotherapy and biofeedback. Okay, so you're going to be able to, again, the brain is something we really don't know anything about. But again, you're going to be able to see what happens to the brain when Bob Beamon has his world record jump. What differentiated him at that point in time? All we know is he just took off, ran hard, and jumped further than any other human being had ever considered jumping.
He also had sex the night before. We're
going to do the brainwaves when he's doing that. Okay, designer jeans, and I'm not talking about the kind you wear. A Penn physiologist has used gene therapy to spur mice to run 6 times faster and gain 40% more muscle. So imagine injecting the gene that makes EPO rather than injecting EPO. Wow. A whole new frontier. Okay? Now this is all performance related. I talked to my daughter about this because she works for a gene therapy company, and she says it's possible, and they are also working on a gene for all of us old guys that they're thinking will be able to be injected into the human body and will restore your muscularity to a much earlier point in time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. What would you give to be back, to have your same PRs as when you were 25, at 65, you know? I think we'd give a lot. Now, I'm sure the technology is not going to be cheap. You're not going to Costco and buying a supply of these things, but it's interesting that they're getting to this point. But it will have, all of this stuff is expected within 10 to 15 years. Now, iRobot stuff, exoskeletons. Okay, we talk about improving muscle memory for golf, tennis, etc. Okay, they project that they're going to be able to put exoskeletons on the body to help you develop your skill patterns and to train you so that your muscle memory and everything will become locked in much quicker. Because when you see the big thing that when tennis coaches coach tennis players, and beginning people particularly, it's the patterning. When people go to hit the tennis ball, they never hit it the same way. One time they hit it down here, one time they hit it up here, one time they smack it out of the park. Okay, it's always, we listen to tennis coaches coach, low to high, low to high. What are they talking about? They're talking about the pattern of the racket, the wave, the motion that they're trying to get the player to produce. So you strap on this exoskeleton, and then the exoskeleton takes you through that. Good golfers usually say it takes 150 swings of the club in order to groove a particular change in their swing. 150, I think it's per day for 30 days. Something like that. That's a heck of a lot of repetitions, and most of us won't spend the time doing that. But this is something else that's coming down the pipe that maybe will be available to us. Okay, Osmo Nutrition's Stacy Sim, I guess she's a nutritionist with them, calls plasma osmolality, water particle balance, a technique that can boost human outputs 20%, which is better than what most PEDs do. Just balancing water content and the different electrolyte stages. Unbelievable. Personal pads, these are going to be out in a year. These are sort of pads that will conform to the body and will respond to the different impacts. They'll blow up when they're necessary. POC Sports introduced a viscoelastic polymer dough in sporting goods that adapt to the force of the impact. Okay, here's the one I like, Miracle Meds. Visco supplement injections. How many of you in here have had Synvisc injections? Anybody here? No bad knees in here? Okay. Synvisc is a lubricant that is made from a rooster's comb. Okay? So if you ever see a bunch of funny looking roosters walking around, you know they were good for the cause. But they take that stuff and they turn it into a liquid and they inject it into the joint. And it lubricates the joint. It's a high concentration of hyaluronic acid is what it is. Well, they believe that they are going to produce, as an offshoot of Synvisc, they're going to be able to develop a medication which is going to allow tissue to replicate itself. So they think that there's going to be an injection within 10 to 15 years that will regenerate an ACL once you tear it. Ooh, scary. We're turning into chameleons or whatever those things are. But those are some of the things coming down the pipe that I think are going to be something that you'll probably see within your lifetime, and you'll go, damn, Chu was right. Okay? All right.
There's a clinic in Calgary that one of my naturopaths is, they're a group of his buddies.
Yep.
They're the first clinic in Canada to start doing reproductive adipose harvested, careful of the word, stem cell.
Right.
PRP injection.
Okay.
And prolotherapy injections. So they're already talking about being able to create higher regenerative capacity.
Yep.
And this is happening right now because Tiger and all these guys are flying to Europe. They're bringing their own guys in right now.
Yep.
And they were asked by the CFL to actually not do it for the CFL because it was putting the Stamps on an unlevel playing field.
Yeah, you can bet somebody's going to do it. Okay, so in conclusion, where we started from to where we wind up is still going to be dependent upon establishing a base and developing the talent. Okay, so we're never going to get away from that. That's our basic mission in life. Look back at those who came before us and realize that their motivation and their goals were developing strength. Talked last night about, we had a visiting coach from Japan who was the jumps coach for Japan, and I could not convince him in my discussions with him that the difference between Japanese triple jumpers and American triple jumpers was their strength levels. And I said, look, Americans train to develop strength and power, which we learned from the East Europeans. And he just refused to acknowledge that, refused to agree to that. And I said, okay, fine. Japan led the world in the triple jump in the 1932 Olympics, and that's the last time they did, and that's the last time they will, going by your philosophy. So at any rate, we'll see. But at any rate, we've learned quite a bit. But again, as I just pointed out, there will be more to come as technology advances, and technology is something you might as well embrace because we're not going to get away from it. It's going to be there, and the supply of information coming down the pipeline now is no longer a trickle, it's a torrent. And we're going to see just a flood of this stuff just continue. So it's going to be interesting. You're going to have clinics like the one he talked about in Calgary spring up. People are going to be experimenting. The possibilities of stem cells, the possibility of regenerative therapy is becoming greater. And then you throw in the possibility of introducing genes that will restore us to what we once were. Oh my God. I can't wait till I can destroy some of those age group track records. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's my spirit.